The Dallas Cowboys signed a four-time Pro Bowl wide receiver on Monday. How will he impact the offense going forward? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode of Locked On Cowboys podcast is sponsored by Simply Safe Home Security. With Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There is no safe like Simply Safe. Visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, what's going on, sir?
Lots. We got to talk about all 22. We got to talk about a new Cowboys on the team. So we should let's hop right into it.
Yeah. So the Cowboys officially signed four-time Pro Bowl receiver T.Y. Hilton on Monday. A little bit out of the blue, but it's not totally unexpected. I actually went back and listened to a show that we did in July when you and I were talking about some of the free agent receivers, including Julio Jones, Will Fuller, Odell Beckham. And we both said, hey, maybe not to start the year, but midway through the year, if you need a receiver, why not T.Y. Hilton? Here we are. What was your initial reaction with the move?
It made sense. We started, just as people that kind of are prognosticators on the Cowboys, we saw some tea leaves that seemed pretty kind of clear to indicate that there were some folks talking about it at least.
I also wonder if they just saw him in the building, by the way, that this went down, right? Oh,
maybe.
Hey, there's T.Y. Hilton.
Oh, look, there's T.Y. Hilton walking around. Maybe he's getting signed. Yeah, I mean, it felt like his name started getting mentioned on Cowboys Twitter kind of out of the blue by several key folks. So it's like, that's when it first kind of popped to my radar, and it makes sense. I think once you realize that, or you kind of got the sense that Odell Beckham wasn't an in-season option for the Cowboys, it became about, well, do we need an in-season option, or can we wait until the playoffs and see if Odell can help us? And if we do need an in-season option, do we need to consider signing somebody else, or can we make it with James Washington and Noah Brown and that sort of thing? The Cowboys felt like they needed to go out and get another guy. They felt like T.Y. Hilton was available to them. It was a good fit for what they're looking for and what he can provide. You're talking about 4 games left in the season. Listen, we'll get into T.Y. Hilton, but I think, the main kind of crux of our conversation back in July when we talked about him was, how reliable could he be health-wise, right? Like, could he survive an entire season?
For a 16, 17-game season. He's just not going to make it.
He has skills left from what we saw the last time he was on the football field, but it's about having to come to rely on a player like this for a full 16-game season, which was, problematic to say the least his last few years on the field. But if you're talking about a half to quarter season rental with some playoff additions on there, sign me up. I think it's a good fit, again, for what the Cowboys are trying to do, what they need in that wide receiver core. Not only just a veteran to kind of help everybody else beneath him, but also a guy that can change the shape of how defenses are playing the Cowboys. And I'm assuming it's at a good cost. So I like the signing a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm happy that the Cowboys didn't just rest on their laurels, having done some due diligence on Odell Beckham. They saw that they had a problem. They needed to identify it, and they went out and got someone who they think they can fix the problem.
Yeah, and I saw the numbers from T.Y. Hilton. Like, if he hits every single incentive, I think he's going to make like $1.5 million this year. That includes the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl. I think he's guaranteed $600,000 this year.
I'll pay that $1.5 million if we're winning the Super Bowl, baby. I'll take it.
I think he's guaranteed $600,000, which is basically nothing. It just makes so much sense for so many different reasons, right? Like, at this stage in the season, you're less worried about special team stuff because it's only for 4 games in the playoffs. You don't have to worry about the long-term roster construction. It also doesn't hurt that 2 of your next 4 games are against opponents that he knows really, really well in the Jaguars and the Titans. That doesn't hurt. You have some nice weather games coming up, which also doesn't hurt considering he's really a dome player. And he's exactly what they needed in terms of just somebody else that can win in one-on-one coverage, that can stretch the field a little bit. You don't need him to play 35, 40 snaps a game, but like the 22 snaps that he's in, I think he can give you a lot.
Yeah, and I think, listen, I mean, we'll talk about the game here in a second, but I think, after watching it, the Texans played a ton of zone against the Cowboys, and the Cowboys needed another guy who had the kind of savvy to not only stretch the field to kind of, give you room underneath that kind of cloud cover to operate in the middle part of the zone, but also a guy who can win right away, who can also, who's savvy enough to understand how to run routes against zone, how to sit in zone and make himself available. One thing that T.Y. Hilton doesn't get enough credit for is that he has really good hands. And I think that's really going to be a huge component of this as well. Is just a guy who versus zone can find kind of open spots, knows how to sit, and knows how to catch the ball.
I mean, there's also this question that I've been wanting to ask you is what happens to the rest of the receivers now, right? Because T.Y. is going to be active, and he's not going to play a single down of special teams. So that means CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, and T.Y., none of those guys are playing special teams. Noah Brown's going to be active because he's been pretty reliable, and he does play on special teams. Who are your fifth and sixth receivers?
I mean,
Turpin has got to be one, right?
I think that you've got to start thinking about, I mean, Tolbert and Washington as guys that are going to be sitting as inactives or a roster move of some sort.
That's
right?
what I'm wondering is if we don't get a roster move here soon.
I think Washington might just get cut, right? I mean,
it would be terrible for him that he just gets back, he plays one game, and then he gets cut. But I mean, that just might be the situation here, right?
I mean, I really feel for him because ultimately his career with the Dallas Cowboys would be essentially getting here, getting hurt for most of the season, coming back, dropping one pass, and then getting cut. Like James Washington is probably a better player than that,
he definitely is a better player than that.
But that's the unfortunate reality of how the NFL works.
But all in all, I there's nothing to complain about with this signing.
No,
for the Cowboys.
I love
the
it.
money is low. I think he's going to be much like Jason Peters, like a perfect guy in that locker room. Look at the ages of some of the receivers the Cowboys have. They just don't have that one vet that can kind of help them in a playoff game, right? Like, hey, CD, this is what they're doing. Go do this. I wouldn't be surprised if he has more value on the plane rides home from the game than he does even on the field.
Yeah, just on a professionalism level. I mean, just, he knows how to be a pro and a Pro Bowl level pro. And I think that's going to help everyone, including especially CeeDee Lamb.
I'm in. I really, really like the move, especially at this point of the season. There's absolutely no risk. It feels like he can give you 7 good games at the end of the season if you need him. And that's perfect for where he's at in this stage of his career. All right, let's do some all 22 notes because we've got a bunch of them. We're not going to be able to get through all of them today, but we want to do that. But first, let's tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup, they've got you covered at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, and we know that you do, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They are always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Landon, we've got a million things to talk about from the All-22, but something that I would really like to discuss with you is the right tackle play after Terence Steele went down. The Cowboys gave that first shot to Josh Ball. What are your thoughts? You just tell me what you thought after rewatching him play.
Well, I mean, look, the hardest part sometimes with this stuff is like not having kind of preconceived notions going into, evaluating these guys. And that was honestly like the issue. A lot of the issue here is that, it felt like when I was watching the game, he got pulled for Jason Peters. And a lot of that is kind of what happened. But going back and watching it, I was surprised by, I don't want to say how well he played, but how not poorly he was playing, up until those 2 obviously disastrous snaps back to back that he had. Right. And I think that, those even those 2 snaps to me, like are endemic of.
They're complicated, is what I would say.
Well, I mean, one begat the other, right? It's a situation where he and I heard Brian Broaddus talk about losing confidence, and if you want to call it that, that's one thing. I think there's a certain point when the chess game between a defensive end and an offensive tackle can reach kind of really critical spots going one way or another. He lost track of his set depth on that first disaster snap. Yep. Let's talk about the bad snaps first, right? He lost his kind of his placement on the depth of his set, and then overset outside. So he gave the pass rusher the entirety of the inside, kind of in a reaction to realizing that his initial kind of quick set didn't get far enough and deep enough, and then he overcompensated quickly, and then was able to be beat inside. Once he had done that, like, now he's thinking about, oh, I can't overset inside. I can't overset outside. Now I got to kind of, be strong on my inside post and make sure that I'm not allowing anything inside. And then what happens then? He gets beat cleanly on the outside. He, doesn't get almost any kind of block. And then the defensive end's able to get around the corner and get a hand on Dak's arm.
But even on that play, the quarterback didn't do him a lot of favors, right? Dak got to the end of his drop and stood there. If Dak would have just slid up a little bit, he might have been able to kind of avoid getting his arm hit. It's not excusing Ball's rep. It wasn't a good rep, but I think Dak could have done a better job of helping out his tackle there.
That's fair. I mean, I think that that you could talk about stepping up into the pocket. I think the other part of that too is that part of the reason Dak didn't want to step up into the pocket is because he was in the end zone at the time that he did that. So you don't want to get caught up in the wash and then accidentally trip on your offensive lineman's foot. And, it's okay to take a sack at the 30, but when you're in the end zone, you fall down because you tripped over someone, it's 2 points and you're punting the ball. So, but you're not right. You're not wrong as far as the, angle that was produced, that was allowed by Ball. In a normal situation, you would have liked to see him Dak step up a little bit more to deliver the ball. Now, having said that, we talked about those 2 reps. They weren't great, and they need to be better. Outside of that, and if you remember when Ball was in the game, that was during which they were doing long stretches of running the football. Part of that could have been, hey, Terence Steele's not in the game anymore, and we've got Ball, so we don't need to run the ball because that's probably something that he's more comfortable with than pass protection. But I think the other part of it was that they had just been throwing the football a ton before that and didn't have a ton of success, had some negative plays before that. And let's be clear. Part of my notes include the fact that Terence Steele was having a bad game. Like, he wasn't having a good game before he got injured.
As a pass protector, especially.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. He was really struggling as a pass protector. And so I think that they got in there, they ran the football a little bit, and that's Ball looked fine in there. And even in the pass plays, because I think they were using a lot more play action, they were doing bootleg stuff. He seemed fine. He was able, they gave him some help. And sometimes they didn't, but it felt like for the most part he wasn't destroying the game plan, or it wasn't a Chaz Green situation. It wasn't like you can't give this guy enough help situation. And he was availing himself. Okay, he was moving bodies in the run game. He's playing football that you could win with at a certain level. But I do think that those 2 snaps that he had were problematic. I can understand the need to make sure that you've got the best solution in there. And I think we can have a whole conversation about what the best solution is here at right tackle. And that's probably a whole podcast. But I think for the most part, going back and watching it, I would say that Ball didn't play so poorly that I felt like they had to pull him desperately. I think he had 2 really bad snaps, and they felt like they would get better play if they rotated him with Jason Peters. And I think they frankly did.
We're going to find a lot about Josh Ball over the next month, right? Because it does feel like at the very worst, the Cowboys are going to use a rotation here, partly for a couple of reasons. One, I think they want to limit the risk of injury for Jason Peters. I still think if in the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if Peters takes the majority of the snaps at right tackle, but it feels like they want to kind of ease him into that role.
Yeah.
But I also want to see, I think they want to see what they have in Ball, and we're going to find out. Because we're going to see over the next couple of weeks Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, Brandon Graham, Hassan Reddick, all those guys for the Eagles. And then it's the Titans with their pass rush and Bud Dupree. And then in week 18, Chase Young and Montez Sweat. Like, we're going to find out quickly how big of a liability, if at all, Josh Ball is for the Cowboys. Not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think you'd rather have it this way than having some bad opponents, and then all of a sudden you play Nick Bosa in the first round of the playoffs, right?
Look, right now as it stands, the Cowboys are like, I think something like 99% likely to make the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, right? You have to make it to the playoffs healthy enough to even, consider going anywhere. So in order to kind of keep Jason Peters healthy, and like for the reasons you mentioned, you want to see what you have in Josh Ball. And look, who knows? Maybe Josh Ball becomes a revelation in the next two games. It's think about the guy that we're talking about who just got injured, guys.
I'm not after the way Terence Steele's rookie season went, I'm not gonna say that he can't become a fine NFL player. I'm not counting on it. I'm not betting on it, but you just never know.
I had a lot of people in my mentions talking to me about, well, how is this going to pass muster? How would a rotation pass muster in the playoffs? And guys, we're a month away from the playoffs. We need to make it to the playoffs. I need Jason Peters to play in 4 games before he can play in the playoffs. So you do what you got to do to see who the best combination is, and then
Cowboys are still in contention for the number 1 seed. Like, yeah. I know it seems crazy because the Eagles just start losing games, but if one thing goes poorly next week for the Eagles, the Cowboys can still earn the number 1 seed. You got to get there first, right?
Yeah, I think we cannot get ahead of ourselves. Like, this, especially since that was everyone's complaint these last few weeks. You have to focus on what's going on ahead of you, plan for this next game, and then try to survive to the playoff and then deal with it at that point.
We should also just talk about Jason Peters, because I thought he was really good on that final drive of the game. It's so sometimes ugly looking, and his technique is so wonky, but I mean, things pretty good. He's just not going to help you really in the run game at all, and you're not going to be able to do like that on Pollard's first touchdown play. Terence Steele pulls out wide and just buries a safety into the back of the end zone, basically. Peters isn't going to do that, but I think as a pass protector, I think you can get by with him if that's what you need to do. Like, if Ball is just struggling so bad, I think Peters is a pretty good option.
I thought Peters played, frankly, better than Steele overall at right tackle in yesterday's game. So yeah, I mean, obviously it was incredibly impressive for a guy who hasn't played right tackle since, the Macarena was around or whatever. Like, I mean, it's pretty impressive to see him just step out there and play very competent right tackle. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. All right, let's talk a little bit about the defense, Landon, before we head out. But before we do that, we want to tell you that this podcast is sponsored by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They are currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the Prize Pick app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. You deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, let's talk about another injury. Jonathan Hankins, he has a strained pectoral muscle. Jerry Jones said that he's going to be out for the rest of the regular season. There's a chance that we can see him in the playoffs. Based on what you saw, how big of a loss is that for the Cowboys moving forward?
Well, I mean, based on what I've seen these last few weeks, I think it's a loss for sure. I mean, he was playing really good football and was able to, and really able to kind of stabilize the interior run defense. I will say that I feel like the defensive tackles since he's been here have also kind of been playing better football. And I think part of it has been, improvement that we've seen from guys like Gallimore, and
Carlos
part
Watkins.
of it. Well, I mean, I was about to separate him out into his own category as far as I'm concerned, because I think he has been an absolute revelation for this team.
Yeah.
I think the last couple of weeks he has started playing such great football. It's a ton of little things, just keeping offensive linemen off the linebackers. I mean, Leighton Vander Esch needs to have his own conversation about how well he played in this game too. But I think a huge part of that was his ability to kind of be free to run to the football without being stopped by offensive linemen. And Carlos Watkins is a huge part of that. Can we real quick, I know we don't have a ton of time, but I would love to go over these last 4 plays on the goal line.
Yes.
Because I think that, so just a reminder, like the Cowboys basically throw the interception, and the Texans get the ball 1st and 5 on the 5-yard line, 1st and goal on the 5-yard line. So the first play, D-Law and Leighton Vander Esch basically stone a guard tackle power play and destroy it in the backfield, which clogged up the entire backfield. And then the running back had nowhere else to go because Carlos Watkins had basically stopped the center dead in his tracks and pushed him back into the backfield, so thereby causing only a 1-yard gain. 2nd and 4, they try a bootleg play action pass to a crosser who was that same guy who caught like 10 passes in that game.
Yep.
And basically, he was able to get outside. Driscoll was able to get outside, throw the ball. The Moore was able to cut back inside from Hooker, Leighton Vander Esch, and Diggs, all over pursued. And then suddenly Carlos Watkins, like Leroy Jenkins, came out of nowhere in the pursuit and was able to tackle Moore on the 1-yard line, saving the touchdown and basically saving the game. We're going to talk about the next play, which was the defensive play of the game, as far as I'm concerned. But let us not forget that 3 of your best players over pursued on what would have been the game-losing touchdown, and Carlos Watkins came out in a hustle play and made the tackle from defensive tackle, saving the ball on the 1-yard line. 3rd and 1, jumbo personnel. They have an extra offensive lineman in at tight end who is over DeMarcus Lawrence. Earlier in the game, they tried to block D-Law with the tight end, and it did not go well. So they tried to do it again, but except this time they made an offensive lineman a tight end. Guess what? Bad idea. D-Law beats him cleanly on a swim right off the bat, gets in the backfield, was stumbling, but managed to lunge towards the running back, bring him down to the ground. Huge 2-yard loss, one of the biggest plays of the season. First off, I'd love to hear your comments on what you were thinking when you saw that real quick before we move on.
He did it again, right? Because he did this exactly against the Lions in almost the same situation where the Lions had a chance to take the lead, and he forces a fumble at the 1-yard line in that game. Tank is he's a winning player. Like, that's just the best way I can describe it. Whenever you need him to make a big play, it seems like he's the guy that does it.
Absolutely. Just like a closer in the best possible way.
Think about in the playoff game against the Lions when he was a rookie, right?
Yep. I mean, it's where it started.
He fumbled the ball, and everybody were making fun of him. And then what does he do? He closes the game with another strip sack. Like, every time Dallas has needed a big play, he's there.
It was such a turning point in his career, right? Like, he fumbles that ball, and you're like, and if you remember at that point, he had been a real disappointment because he was a 2nd-round pick. He had not gotten on the field. He kept on being injured, and we're like, is this guy even worth it? Suddenly, he saves your entire playoff game, and since then, he's been one of the most clutch players on your team, and one of the most clutch players in the NFL, if you look at it. Finally, you get to 4th and 3 after that huge lost tackle, and basically Watkins wins instantly on what looks like a counter option play. I mean, that was a very odd looking play where they faked one direction and the quarterback rotated back the opposite direction to run an option play. Watkins won so quickly, and because it was like there was that kind of counter action where the quarterback turned to the backside of the play first, he saw Watkins win instantly and was coming right at him. So when he turned around to run the option, he felt Watkins chasing him in pursuit on the backside, and I think that he just basically abandoned the pitch play because he didn't think he was going to be able to pitch it. Just decided to try to cut back upfield, and he ran right into the Cowboys' waiting arms. I thought that series really showed you just what this Cowboys defense was all about, and I really wanted to point it out because I think it really shows you how valuable a guy like Carlos Watkins is. Maybe he didn't make those specific plays, on any one of them necessarily, but he was a integral part on every single one of them individually. And that's just, you have to have performances like that for your down roster.
And you need those guys, right? Like the guy 41 on your roster that just makes one or two big plays to help swing a game. Carlos Watkins has done that for a few years now. So it's nice to see. I've got one more thing on DeMarcus Lawrence. Since it was announced that he fractured his foot and he was dealing with a knee injury. Okay. Since then, which was, I believe, in week 11, he's the second highest graded defensive end in football, only behind Myles Garrett.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He has 10 run stops in the last 4 games. And that's by far the most. I mean, he's been absolutely phenomenal. I can't say enough about how good DeMarcus Lawrence has been this season.
We talked about it last week, right? We talked about how he had 5 run stops by himself and how crazy that was. He had 5 more this game. It's totally nuts. So, yeah, I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence playing as good a football as anybody in this on this team right now. So, absolutely.
Really quickly, back to that 4th down play. Do you know who made a really good stop? It's Anthony Barr on that final play. He was
the guy right there that was waiting.
He was right the guy, and it was like once Driscoll ran into him, he ran into a wall. Like he did not move at all. And that's one of the advantages of having somebody like Anthony Barr. I thought he was a little up and down in this game, but when you needed him to be in the right spot at the right time, he was there and he made the play.
And you know what, to kind of speak onto his counterpart, Deron Bland, man, I mean, I saw a play that was like absolute linebacker perfection on one of these toss sweeps outside where he weaved through traffic like he was some kind of slalom skier going between poles and was beeline straight for the running back and made a tackle for a loss. These linebackers are playing at a really high level. We can't even get into Leighton Vander Esch because I could do a whole show just on how great Leighton Vander Esch played this last week. But I think that this linebacker play has really made a big difference. And I think, look, we're going to miss Hankins. There's no doubt. But the improved play of guys like Watkins, of Gallimore, Oso Digizua had maybe his best game. We should talk about him.
Yep.
And the improved play of these linebackers, I think that alone hopefully can help mitigate some of the loss you're going to feel from losing a guy like Hankins. And Bohanna, we can't not mention Bohanna. Yeah, Bohanna looks almost like a different player now. It's crazy.
And I would have to imagine he's going to see a lot more snaps over the next few weeks because Hankins was playing. I'm looking at it right now. He was playing 27 or 15 to 27 snaps a game. Played a little bit more than that early on the year, but I think they're going to need Bohanna to play 22 snaps a game moving forward.
And Watkins will get. I'm assuming he's going to get a bump in his number of snaps as well. But Bohanna and Watkins, I think, will be the 2 guys to really take over.
Just one more player, really, really quickly. I know we're running out of time, but J-Ron Curse. I mean, I thought before the game there was a chance that he could have been out for the year with the way that he was being carried off the field. And what does he do? He comes back and plays one of his best games of the season. Like J-Ron Curse was phenomenal in tackling and coverage. He was just really, really good in this game. And I don't know if there's a team in the league that has 3 safeties they feel as comfortable with playing than the Cowboys right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different types of formations that you can run that are fundamentally sound, that are X's and O's sound, because you have a safety who it can hit like a linebacker, who can cover like a safety. It just gives you so many options. Now that's the other part of like the Cowboys run defense. They're able to put down 3 tackles and have two other linebackers, and then basically have Curse function as a linebacker if it's a run play,
Donovan Wilson,
function as a safety or as a pass game. Yeah, exactly. So you're really lucky to have a couple of different guys like that. And Mukwamu being able to come in and play at that size too is just another luxury of having guys like that kind of body size.
Do you know Donovan Wilson leads all safeties and stops by like 10 right now? It's incredible. He's our 3rd safety. He leads all safeties and big plays, basically.
It's nuts.
He's
just a big play. He's a big play machine. Look, it's funny because I'm sorry. I know we have to go.
No, you're good.
That second touchdown. Look, he's got to play that ball better. I mean, he was in position.
Yeah.
He saw the ball. He just mistimed the jump or jumped poorly. I went back and rewound it a couple times and I couldn't figure it out. But literally the next series, he puts his head on the ball carrier's arm as he's trying to grind out a first down. And then as the ball carrier is trying to gyrate more motion, Wilson's got his head on his arm. And so his arm just goes, boop, and the running back just throws the ball basically behind him right to an awaiting hooker. So, I think it's, it's just real. Oh, sorry. It wasn't hooker, it was Diggs. It's just one of those things where he just generates plays, and it's really impressive to watch week in and week out.
I mean, again, he's your third safety, and he played 61 snaps in this game.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how you mitigate, like some of these loss of these corners too, right? Is you're playing more of these safeties and kind of being able to play them in nickel roles and stuff like that. It's, it helps to have depth all around. It helps with all of this problem solving you have to do.
Yeah. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, all the same places that you would download the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Check us out over on YouTube. Tomorrow, we'll be back to answer your Twitter questions. We're going to get into some more of our all 22 notes. We have a bunch of them. We didn't get to all of them today. So please send your questions in. We're going to answer the best 3 on air. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I am at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll see you guys next time.